All right, troops.
I'm Lei Zervoulakos, and I'm currently a third-year doctoral clinical forensic psychology student. I'm also working towards my licensure to become a professional clinical counselor. I'm also the founder of a mental health nonprofit organization called Trauma Speaks, in which our purpose and mission is to raise awareness regarding mental health and its associated treatments, and emphasizing that mental health is just as important as physical health, and that it's not black and white. The gray is important as well. It's not just about having mental health diagnoses like depression, schizophrenia, PTSD, but it's also acknowledging that, those face of life problems, grief, stress is also important to raise awareness and be addressed.
Well, Lee, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of the madness. But for anybody that is listening, we do have artistic guests. We've had artistic guests up to this point, but because I do want to bring a bit more emphasis on mental health, I've been reaching out to some mental health experts, or at least ones that will probably know a bit more than myself. Hence why I very kindly had Lee offer to come on to the podcast, and I'm really, really grateful for that. Thank you so much, Lee.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Don't worry, I'll keep my respectable head on for this one. I'll try and contain the swearing, because that's just kind of how I go. It's like my nervous tick. So what I like to do, Lee, is I like to get my guests to tell our audience about their origin story, because if there's one thing we all have in common, it is our origins. So, Lee, for my 5 faithful followers, please tell them your origin story.
So I was actually born and raised in the Philippines.
Wow.
I moved to the United States back in 2011 to be reunited with my parents. So basically, I just grew up with my sister and my aunt or my grandmother taking care of us. It's funny because I didn't really know or understand mental health until I moved here in the US. So that's really like what surprised me of like what is mental health. And it's funny because like my mom is a clinical psychologist, so I didn't really understand or grasp what she did. All I knew was that she worked at HR, and I never thought or made a connection that it had something to do with, helping others with like mental health struggles or those diagnoses that I mentioned earlier. So I moved here 2011. I finished my high school here. I went to college. I did my bachelor's in psychology. And after that, I decided to pursue my master's degree in forensic psychology. And I chose forensic psychology because that population, forensic population, which is individuals who can be involved in the legal setting. So whether they were a victim of a crime or they were the perpetrator of the crime, they're very underserved individuals, and especially like sex offenders, those particular types of population, no one really wants to deal with them. So I thought, like, I'm kind of interested in this field, like helping marginalized individuals. So why not? So I started my master's in forensic psychology, and I actually like working with the forensic population. I have a background in, or I have worked at an outpatient substance abuse clinic where I helped homeless individuals suffering from severe opioid disorder.
Oh.
So I actually like working with them. And so I went on and pursued my doctorate, which is where I am right now.
So what specifically drove you towards like the opiate side of it, rather than like obviously you touched on the sex offender side of it as well. What specifically drew you to the opiate?
So the working with substance abuse actually just kind of like my last resort option
Mm,
because going into the program, I knew for sure that I probably wouldn't be an effective clinician if I worked with people abusing substances because I knew, like, from my upbringing, I had like strong personal beliefs, and that's something that, as a prospective clinician, that's something that we have to be aware of, making sure that we're not imposing our personal beliefs and values onto our clients
mm,
because it can harm the clients. So I was like, I don't really know if this is gonna work out for me. But I took on the challenge because that was an opportunity for me to be like, I need to challenge myself as a professional and know that I went into this practicum or this agency side knowing that I tried and I learned that this is a population that I can work with. And
mm,
that's also something that was encouraged at my school, at least, because we're students, so this is our time to kind of explore what populations we're comfortable working with, what populations we might not want to work with when we're licensed clinicians.
mm,
So when I started working there, I was very overwhelmed because I had no prior clinical experience. So I feel like I was just thrown into the ocean.
mm,
Um, but learning about my client's history and just kind of like being able to humanize um, their situation, like being homeless individuals, like a lot of people regularly just kind of like turn away, don't even pay attention to them, don't
mm,
recognize them, disrespects them because they're homeless. Just hearing their stories kind of changed my perspective into substance abuse overall, that they just didn't wake up one day and started abusing drugs. There was a
mm,
reason why they were led to abusing substances or alcohol.
mm,
And so that kind of changed my perspective. And now I love working with people who suffer from substance abuse disorders.
mm. That's really, well, really commendable, especially when you were saying how your personal, well, beliefs, it made it a challenge to work with them. But it's refreshing to hear that you've been able to conquer that challenge, and good on you. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking? I know they say you should never ask women their age, but I'm not like any normal guy. I just blurt it out. I don't run up and people go, "How old are you?" I just go,
No problem. I'm 25.
25. Well, for someone just at the quarter of a century mark, like, you're so wisdomous. Like, it's really refreshing to hear. And I'm 34. I still think I've got the wisdom of like an 11-year-old. Yeah, I mean, I'm probably one of those guys that just sits and wonders, like, if I stay awake all night, do I get morning breath? Yeah, that's about as wisdomous as I go. But we'll go back a little bit to talking about like your childhood. So your mum and dad were already in the US, but you stayed in the Philippines. What was the reasons behind that?
So originally, the plan was we were all going to go together to
Mm,
the US. But it was right around 2002. So it was just like right after 9/11.
yeah.
So immigration was a bit strict.
Mm,
And so that's why it took us longer to get here.
mm,
And they also had, unfortunately, like people took advantage of them, especially like one lawyer that they chose to hire and help them with like all the legal stuff.
yeah.
They got caught into a scandal or whatsoever, and so they wasted all that money, and then it got pushed and pushed and pushed. And so, like, I think roughly 8 to 10 years later, that's when we got moved here.
That must have been really, really hard for you, especially like not just for physically, like they're not there, from a mental standpoint. How did you cope being without your parents?
That's looking back, I honestly don't know because I was 6 years old when they left.
Yeah.
So at that time, I didn't know that they were actually in the US.
Right.
So what they told me was like they're just on a part of the island in the Philippines.
All right.
So all along, for maybe like 2 3 years, all along I thought that they were in a different island and not in the US.
Oh.
I guess you could say like I was so trusting, innocent, and naive that I'm like, oh, like they're just in a different island. Um,
I mean, in fairness, if you're not slightly naive at 6 years old, then well, I know I said that you were wisdomous for 25, but if that was how wisdomous you were at 6, that's crazy, man. Well, I always say that I was an old fart when I was 4, but that's just me being grumpy. So, who did you stay with when you were still in the Philippines?
it was my sister and we had a housemaid, so it was kind of like that was the household. And then every weekend or during the week, either my grandma would come and check in, or my aunt would come by or like take us out to the grocery or something.
Mm,
So that's kind of like how we lived.
yeah. And you were still able to manage, what I take it, manage like your school life and what as well as the home life. It's really
I
it's quite hard hitting for someone so young to do that without like your parents.
It
Wow. Huh.
was very difficult, and also I think I buried myself in like school stuff, especially extracurriculars. So I was very involved at school. I was part of like the cheer dance team. I was part of
Yeah.
sports. I was part of dance. So it's like I got involved in a lot of school activities, and
Mm.
also that was also my escape because living with my sister, like I was also abused. So
Oh.
like
Uh,
I had a very interesting childhood.
yeah. I'm really sorry that you had to go through that. That's horrible. Like, a bit more of a sensitive subject to ask, but how old were you when that happened?
So I was physically abused roughly maybe like shortly after my parents left. And
Oh,
that went on until I was maybe 10 years old.
oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. Well, that's really heartbreaking. I'm a father myself, and if somebody even looks at my kids the wrong way, I want to strangle them. What I can imagine like you going through that at such a tender age and for so long.
Mhm, mhm.
Uh, did you tell your parents after once you got to the US what had happened?
No. So actually, I didn't tell them until maybe I was 15 or 16 years old.
Wow, to keep that bottled up for so long, how did you cope? That must have to have a real impact on your mental health, as well as
Severely.
yeah, as well as your
Yeah,
physical
severe.
health as well. What?
Yes. So it happened like the abuse happened for like 4 years. The only reason why it stopped was because I learned how to fight back. And I
Yeah.
think that scared my sister. Um, and so the physical abuse stopped. Um, I don't want to
Mm,
excuse her actions, but getting into psychology and all of that, being where I am now, I kind of learned things about her that kind of explained her actions. So it
mm,
wasn't because like she didn't like she hated me or anything like that. I guess like that's how she coped
mm,
because she was like probably 12, 13 years old when my parents left. So she was kind of like she became an adult right away to take care
mm.
of me. And
Yeah.
I think that that pressure and that burden was too much. And also she was like going through her own stuff, so probably took it out on me. And like I
Mm.
said, I'm not excusing her actions, but
No,
like
definitely
I
not.
I have a more understanding of like, oh, it wasn't out of hate.
You
It's
think
just
you think maybe subconsciously that's why you've went down the route that you've went down? Maybe it was kind of on a subconscious level to maybe help you process and understand why
oh,
you
I
went
think
through what you went through.
yeah, I think for sure that has something to do with it.
You always find that you tend to psychoanalyze yourself, especially when you're getting into that type of field, don't you? Well,
Yeah,
you
I
go,
think
oh, this is fascinating.
yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we also learn in grad school is like sometimes like when you ask people like why did you go into psychology or why are you becoming a therapist,
Mm,
most of us are kind of like, well, because we went through something and kind of like going into this course or this program allowed us to work through those things.
yeah,
And now it's kind of like, oh, now we're gonna give back and help
yeah,
others.
yeah. So it's like you finally tick that box in your own head, and it's like, right, let's see if we can cross it off with other people.
Mhm.
So I've been on the other side of the fence. I've been through therapy numerous times, but only just recently finally started to manage my mental health in a more positive sense. So I always felt as a patient, I always felt in a way guilty telling my
Mhm.
therapist about the stuff that had happened because I didn't want to feel like I was burdening them or putting pressure on them. I know people would say, well, that's what you're paying the money for. But at the same time,
Mhm.
from a human level, what we always have that kind of fear of opening up. How do you, or from the other side, how do you manage to essentially compartmentalize that and put it at the door so you can keep your own mental health in check?
That's something that we always get asked about, and it's a good question. I think it's we just do it so automatically. I don't know like what exactly is that like boundary,
Mm,
but one thing that I learned is that, you know, what happens in session just, you know, stays there. It's not
mm,
that doesn't mean that we don't think about our clients like throughout the day or like after the session is gone.
mm.
There are days that like when a client brings up like something very traumatic, it
Yeah,
kind of stays with you for like a minute, you know, like
yeah.
after the session, maybe it will last like maybe 30 minutes or to an hour or maybe like in and out throughout the day.
Mm,
But for me, at least, what helps me, especially in those sessions where it's very heavy, I try to just move around, like either work out or like dance or do something that can get my body to sweat or like just
mm.
keep my or just have those endorphins released.
Yeah,
That way, like it feels like it's melting away.
yeah. Well, normally, what in the other episodes of the podcast I've done, what we normally talk about artistic stuff, and then we slowly kind of divulge into the mental health side. But because we're doing everything on the flip side today, I'm gonna turn it around a little bit and ask you about the dancing. So,
Mhm.
what specifically drew you to dancing? What in particular for the release, so to speak?
So I mean, I mentioned it earlier. Ever since I was a kid, I've been involved in dancing.
Mm,
I think that was also how I coped in terms of like, if I didn't have anyone to talk to, or if I didn't have anyone I trusted to, you know, confide in all everything
mhm.
that was going on in me,
Yeah.
dancing helped me kind of express that, like into those moves, or even just to like learning choreography. It helped
Mm,
me like focus on something else, and also like when you start like going through running through the choreography or like practicing the choreography all together, you
mm,
can do full out. So when you go full out, it's like you're releasing all that emotions, all that stress outside of your body. And
mm.
I think just that feeling helps in kind of like being more calm and just kind of like going into a neutral state.
Mm. Aside from also doing it, if you need to relax after a session, are you involved in any kind of dance groups? Do you do any like dance teaching?
No, I wish.
Well, you've obviously got like a passion for it, and that's not me saying you should leave the mental health stuff behind because we need more people like you. Like, this world needs more people like you that are so caring and compassionate and and empathetic to people. Just more for like the not like a side hustle, but just something that gives you a wee bit like, a hobby. Have you ever thought
Mhm.
of like maybe trying to like rejoin like a dance group or something? I mean, it's clearly something that you still do like.
Yeah, I was a part of one maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, but
Yeah.
I guess they got defunded, and that was like
Mm,
they offered free dance classes, and so I would usually take one. But now because everything is like you have to pay for it, I didn't
mhm.
really want to do that. So what I
Yeah.
just do is like I do it on my own.
Mm,
I just look up like on YouTube like certain influencers that do a step by step, and I just
mm.
kind of do that.
What would you say is your kind of favorite style of dance?
Hip hop for sure.
Mm. Yeah, that's definitely something as like as I always say the typical suburban white guy. Well, I could never do that. I would end up like breaking hips I didn't know I had. So I'm always one of the ones that I can act and I can sing, and the guy with two left feet dances better than I can. So I've always appreciated dancing more because I know I can't do it. When I see someone like performing, like acting or singing, I can go, yeah, maybe that wasn't as good, or maybe they should do that, because I know that I'm good at it, and I know that I've got the skills to, if not go toe to toe, then at least beat them. But dancing was always something that I was like, I will just sit back and enjoy this immersive experience because I do not have a clue how you do it, man. So let's look to the future, because this is obviously the first That Mental Ginger show of 2022. What we are starting this year with a bang, and I want to know, what does the future hold for you, Lee? Now that we are entering 2022.
I'm hoping that my nonprofit organization like continues to grow because it just got established a few months ago.
So tell us about the nonprofit.
So, as I said earlier, I'm the founder of Trauma Speaks, which is a mental health nonprofit organization. And I started Trauma Speaks in 2017 as a blog. And my sole purpose for that was to give a safe space for people who experience mental health struggles, whether they were diagnosed or not, to share their stories so that other people, it gets normalized, first of all, and that other people who read that realize that they're not alone if they're in that situation, that whoever shared it, that they're not alone and that they can get support. And then I went on hiatus on that. And after like brainstorming, I decided to, you know what, I want an end goal for it to be a nonprofit organization. So I extended the blog into a podcast and tried to build like some sort of following. And then that's when I kind of like, you know what, I can turn this into a nonprofit organization. And so now here we are. So my goal with my nonprofit organization is to hopefully have a one-stop shop mental health app that people can use. I know, especially for me, like I have to download several apps just to like access different things. So it would be nice to have like just one app that has all the features on it, and people can access easily.
That's really commendable for you. And you said you're in your third year, is that correct?
Yeah.
So, and it's 4 years. Yeah, just making sure, because sometimes it's a bit different like over in the UK than it is over to the US. So just make sure I've got all that right. So once you've got through your 4th year, is that when you do your dissertation?
I'm actually doing my dissertation right now.
Yeah. Fascinating. What's the subject?
It's on campus sexual assault policy and procedures, examining students' perception and knowledge.
Wow.
So I'm focusing on undergraduate students here in the US, whether, first of all, like how much do they know about their campus policy and procedure regarding sexual assault, and also how they perceive their campus policies, whether it's something they think is helpful or something that needs to be changed and all that.
Wow, that's a real challenge. I wish you nothing but the best of luck with that, and I'm pretty sure from how smart you are, how intelligent or articulate you are, I'm pretty sure you'll fly through that. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I would be like, I'll probably have to watch this 2 or 3 times back just to make sure that I got the pronunciation and understanding of it correctly. But yeah, for you, that should be relatively easy, and you're just such a lovely person, and we need more people like you that are willing to kind of take that step up and say the things that should be said and should be normalized, but sadly we're just not there yet. So we're starting to come up on time. I know that you've got a very busy day, and you see clients as well as doing your university studies, as well as doing your not-for-profit, and that's just mind-blowing for me. So I'll round off with the question that I ask all my guests, and it'll be definitely more poignant coming from someone of your credibility. So if you could give one piece of advice to anyone that's struggling with mental health issues at this point in time, what would that piece of advice be and why?
Um, there's a lot of things that I could give in terms of advice because at the end of the day, each person is different.
Hmm.
How they cope would be different. So I don't want to say like, oh, this is like a one size fits all type of advice. They whoever is listening, like you know yourselves better. You know what will work and what will not work. All I can say is that you're not alone, and someone else out there will always or can empathize and understand what you're going through.
Mhm.
And in terms of, I guess like the advice that I can give is reach out. If you feel like you don't have a friend or a family member that you can trust or depend on to give you emotional support, then I would highly encourage you to seek out either the hotlines, the mental health hotlines, or making an appointment with a therapist.
Definitely very sound advice. Lee, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. So we're now going to jump to the Philippines' favourite segment, which is Ask Andrew Anything. Now, 45 faithful followers, after me grilling this guest for 26 minutes and 13 seconds, she now gets to ask me a question. It could be something.
Yay!
It could be something as ridiculous as what is your opinion on the common blue jay, to who would win the fight between resurrected Robin Williams and a just barely living Gene Wilder. So, Lee, do you have a question for this mental ginger?
I do have one question, and I was gonna get deep into it. So if I knew this in advance, I wouldn't have thought about this.
Yeah,
But for me, because I am an advocate in terms of raising awareness about mental health and all that. And one of the goals actually for my podcast, especially, is that raising awareness about male mental health. So I wanted to ask you, because this is interesting, and now like I'm actually appreciative of like male or men in general, like raising awareness about mental health. Like, what brought you into this? I guess like what made you do your podcast this way, like focusing on mental health and all that.
Well, for the five faithful followers, they'll have heard the story a couple of times, but it's one of those ones that I don't mind telling it over and over again because it's good to keep repeating the message and keep repeating what the podcast is about. So when March 2020, we all went into lockdown and everybody and their granny was doing a podcast. And I thought, well, I'm just going to jump on the bandwagon and see how I go. Mm-hmm. So I did a couple of quote unquote series and then decided to take a bit of time away from it. Now, during this time, I've had mental health issues in the past, like up, down, like attempts at suicide, all that kind of stuff. And it's always been kind of a bit of a roller coaster for me. Mm-hmm. During the pandemic, my great auntie Gina died of COVID. She took a stroke. She caught COVID when she was in the hospital, and she never came out. And it really rocked me quite badly. But at the time, I was just trying to stay strong for my family and try and stay strong for my wife. And I've got twin boys. At this point, they were only 2 years old. And I just kind of did everything you shouldn't do. I mean, I don't drink or do drugs or anything like that, but in terms of like bottling up my emotions and suppressing them, all that type of stuff, which the right part of your brain knows isn't healthy, but I did it anyway because you just feel like because you're a man, quote unquote, that you have to be strong and you have to look out for your family and you have to make sure that they're okay before you can focus on yourself. And that didn't help anybody, least of all me. And I started spiraling badly. I started questioning decisions with my kids that should be second nature, but I didn't have a clue. I could barely figure out how to look after them. I just started feeling like I was a horrible father, a horrible husband, a horrible person. And this is the part of the story that I really don't like to tell. And I've never actually told my audience this part. I always say there was a point where I had a breakdown, but this was what happened. Me and my family were out, and my son Kieran started kind of playing up a bit. And normally you just kind of take a deep breath, you carry on, it's fine. But before I realised that I'd smacked him. And I never smacked my kids. And in Scotland in particular, it's now illegal to do that. You can get put in jail, rightly so. And it really rocked me, and I was like, why did I do that? That's not me. That's not who I am. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in smacking my kids like this. And it just all the negative parts of me just started to come flooding out. Well, we went straight home, and I left my wife with the boys, and I just went straight into my room. I just hid under my bed, and my mum and dad had to come down, and they had to help Alison with the boys. And then when my mum came up the stairs to see me, I just started wailing like uncontrollably, like sobbing, like for a good hour, like just screaming that what I felt the world wasn't fair, or how much I missed my Aunt Gina, or how I just wanted to die. I just didn't feel like there was no point in me being alive anymore. And then, obviously, because of what had happened, I had to be upfront with social work, and they removed me from my house for 6 weeks. And that was really, really hard to take. And it's really a struggle, because being told you're a danger to yourself, I mean, I've heard that before, being suicidal. That felt like it was just like an average Tuesday, but being told you're a risk to your family, that was it was like there was rock bottom, there was 50 feet of crap, and then there was me. I just remember sitting in my mom and dad's house in one of the rooms, just thinking, I've got two roads here. I can either take the short one and just off myself now, end it all, or I can take the long road and I can fight. And I really considered that short road. Really, really considered it. And it's something that I'm ashamed to admit that I did consider it, but it's what happens when you're in that spiral. You don't want to continue for yourself. Mental health, when it goes down that way, you're not thinking you're worth anything. So you have to find something out with to fight for. And it was my sons. It was Kieran, it was Connor, and it was my wife Alison. I wanted to get back to them. I wanted to be the dad I knew I could be to my kids, and be the husband that I was to Alison before I took not well. And it was a really, really long road. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of bumps along the way, and I never thought I'd get to the end of it. I'm still not at the end of it, but I'm a lot closer than I was. And for the first time in a really long time, I feel like I'm a good dad to my kids. I feel proud, to say I'm their father, rather than feeling like, oh God, I'm their father. And my wife has been unbelievable to me. She is like my salvation. She took me back when she could have rightly said, no, stay away, you are a danger. And I wouldn't have blamed her for it. I really wouldn't have. But she chose to let me back in after the 6 weeks, and we worked, and it's been a hard road, a really long recovery, but my marriage is in the best place it's ever been, and my kids are thriving. They fill me with joy every single day. Just even talking about them, I get the smile on my face. I didn't have that smile for over a year, thinking about them, because I just thought I wasn't worth it to them. And so while I was going through that, I took the hiatus from doing the show. I started thinking about, I want to pick it up again, but I want to do something meaningful with it. I don't want it to be me ranting down a mic, or me doing things for my own personal glory. That's not who I am. And I wanted to do it for people who may go through the same stuff. Hopefully not the same stuff I've went through, but even just something that it can take 30, 40 minutes out of their day. They can listen to it. We can talk about the arts, which I'm passionate about. I've got a lot of experience in. We can have a bit of a laugh and a giggle, but we can also touch on the mental health side and raise a bit of awareness to it. And you walk out afterwards, feeling, I've learned something. I didn't even realize that I did, because we were having fun, and we were having a bit of banter, and a bit of a laugh, and then a little bit of positive advice at the end to keep you going through that next part of your day. And mean, you'll know yourself what when you're in recovery, they start off saying, like, try and get to the next second, and then the next minute, and then the next hour, and you just keep going like that. Everybody says day by day, but there's a lot of steps before that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I want people to realize. Like, it's constant. It's a constant battle. It's a constant struggle, and it's one that I'm as passionate about fighting as I am about being a good father and being a good husband and helping give back to people. I mean, I know I'm not smart enough to do a degree. I'm definitely not. But if I can do something like this and what put a smile on one person's face,
Mm-hmm.
it's been worth it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Yeah. Oh, that was a bit that was actually quite tough for me to say. What I always give the abridged version, but that probably is a compliment to yourself. What that I felt that I could open and be honest to you for asking the question, and that's, if anything, that just shows what type of character you've got, Lee. And I wish you nothing but success in the work that you do. I will definitely promote the podcast. Make sure to send me the links. I'll put them in the descriptions below in the channel. And again, thank you for taking time out of your day to speak to me. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm honored, and I'm glad that you didn't take the short route.
Yeah, I'm very glad now as well. Especially just to get to have this time to speak to such charming people like yourselves, and then probably like on another podcast I'll end up like making very, very rude and inappropriate jokes and laughing. So we'll have the wide range of experiences. Yeah. So until next time, my 5 faithful followers, I have been Andrew Durning. I will not even attempt to butcher her last name because that will just get me in a load of trouble. So Lee, please finally tell our listeners your full name and just do a little plug for yourself where we can find you.
And I'm Lei Zervoulakos.
So until next time, take care.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.